Today, I have the honor of introducing JG Mair. He's a Vancouver-based multidisciplinary artist and media designer specializing in mixed media, web, and audio. Jeff has a VFA from UVic and a BEd from here at UBC. And he's been working in areas both traditional and digital contemporary art and as a sound engineer for various game studios, developing titles for publishers which include Apple, Electronic Arts, Microsoft, and Netflix. He's had art exhibitions and residencies here in Canada, the States, South Korea, and Japan. And most famously, he's working with Ars Scientia this year. So Jeff's going to tell us a little bit about stuff he's done and stuff he's doing currently. So please help me in welcoming Jeff.
Thanks, James. Great to be here. Thanks for coming out on this wonderful sunny day with donuts. And before I get started in earnest, I'd like to begin by acknowledging that this presentation was produced on traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. We acknowledge our traditional hosts and thank them for their graciousness in welcoming us to carry out this work on their land. In so doing, we recognize the inherent Indigenous rights and title, the implementation without qualification of the UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, or UNDRIP, and support for the 94 calls to action by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I'd also like to thank UBC, Stewart, Blusson Quantum Matter Institute, Morris and Helen Belkin Gallery, and the UBC Department of Physics and Astronomy for initiating and inviting me to participate in the Ars Scientia Artist in Residency program. Notably, Shelley Rosenblum, Andrea Damascelli, Jeremy Hale, and James Day. I'd also like to give a shout out to my fellow Ars Scientian, Timothy Taylor, the collaborator as well, and the novelist, journalist, and professor of creative writing here at UBC. Without Timothy approaching me about this opportunity, I would not be up here right now. As well, my friend, artist Robert Chaplin, for his encouragement over the years. I would also like to acknowledge everyone I've encountered during the residency. Thank you to you all. So I am finding an overwhelming amount of creative inspiration from these interactions at my time here. Before I get into some of the artistic and scientific events happening during my time around Ars Scientia, I'd like to share some of my creative pursuits from the last few years. As part of the presentation, I would also like to walk everyone through one of my new media web-based works entitled Chroma Chamber. I feel all of this may provide kind of a background that could translate into the work happening here at the residency. And then after the presentation, I'd be happy to take some questions. Start with the low, slow pitches first, please, and that's okay. So let's get into my artist statement. I would describe my artistic approach kind of as a look at the pluralities of perception as manifested through both tangible and digital manipulation. I strive to let the work occupy space where what we want to see and what we actually see may not always align. That sometimes muddled middle ground between perception and reality also often lives in the written word. So much of my work has kind of a textual element to it. Lettering, writing, while it can be rife with obvious meaning and overtly so, it also interests me in an aesthetic way. It looks good. As for my working method, I try to let the concept determine the medium, which forces me to work in a more intuitive way than I normally would, because I can kind of get a little too structured. And for the last 15 years or so, I've been occupying the space of live web-based interactive and generative experiences and the implications of algorithms and AI. My original background is in painting and drawing, so I have this kind of parallel media thing going on where I create mixed media works, paintings and drawings. We're rooted in kind of the analog domain, but then I also produce these digitally driven pieces, mostly manifesting as like I said earlier, web-based. I thought I'd share a few of my mixed media pieces prior to jumping into the Chroma Chamber demo. And the following works appear in kind of a roughly chronological order. So narrative number 2, memoirs. These are acrylic paintings, and they feature raised 3D lettering, transmounted above a soft focused painted background, airbrushed. The shadows the letters are casting are the real light. They are part of a series entitled Urbitory that examines the relationship between individuality and authority. The darkness of the content is squarely at odds with the humor, and I'm going to quote Michael Turner, who wrote about my work. Never to leave, he says, never to leave things on the downer side. Mair opens up an especially generous space for misery's enemy, humor. Continuing that kind of trend, Tomes introduces a paradox of thought by presenting the viewer with a small volume of books that establish a middle ground between two types of perceived knowledge. A bit of self-reflection for each individual viewer. The contents of each book are completely subjective. Sealed forever behind a case, the viewer's imagination is meant to fill the pages, so to speak. Another subtext is the fact that hard copy books in and of themselves are sadly becoming slightly anachronistic and must be preserved forever before they vanish forever. Sense is part of a series where I worked with primarily dimensional text only. It investigates emergence and submergence. The tension between the sinking and surfacing of each letter creates a subtle tug of war, which kind of defies the serene and balanced nature of the word itself. Site D is a mixed media series exploring several vacant lots in East Vancouver. Site responsive to ambient room conditions, they have a non-powered light amplification system within the piece that creates a dynamic effect of an infinite distance in the skies. I think Vancouver artist curator Michael Bjornson summed up the series nicely in my show he curated in 2013. Each site is recorded via hand-painted vignettes, legal identifiers, and organic samples. They provide a lingering glimpse of the transitory state of the urban fabric. Inherent to the work are issues of land development, reclamation, displacement, and appropriation. So the little kind of landscape part is a tiny painting. Everything else is kind of found. So this is from a series, actually a show I did called Utopian Dystopia, and it's a commentary about the inversion of process, as these records of transaction, as I call them, are hand-painted recreations of raw canvas, linen, and wood panels, and their accompanying art store purchase receipts. So I bought the panels, painted over them white, and repainted them to look exactly like they looked before I painted over them white. So the entire visible surface has been recreated via paint and ink. The only thing that's real there is the fastener, the thumbtack, or what have you. I would say, in all honesty, this series pushed me to the absolute limit of my painting technical abilities. I won't do it again, but but it's good it kind of turned out.
The receipt is painted?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Wow.
Everything.
Can we look at it again? That's amazing.
Ooh, backing up.
All right, let's go.
We'll come back to it, Jeremy.
Right.
Thank you. Yeah. Stasis generator, as you can see here, is I did at BAMP Center. I completed at BAMP Center my residency there. It's a multimedia installation. It consists primarily of a modular sculptural form, which was earlier sitting on the floor. And once the lights are dimmed and the generator is powered up, spectral text can be seen hovering in midair at eye level above the kind of cubical structure. The ever-changing text consists of pure light and thematically addresses the duality of interpretation. A piece called Hierarchy, which is site-specific but can also be installed anywhere. With pretexts of literal and metaphorical power, this piece utilizes the found light switch within the gallery. This is Chernoff Fine Art in 2018, so the top light switch is real. It's also the only one in the on position. Everything else has been reconstructed. It augments that switch, that real switch, with all these reconstructed ones with an incrementally kind of extruding and descending switch boxes that have all been cast in resin and hand painted. So they're essentially plastic. Someone knocked one of them off the wall at the show, and I was like, this is upside down. They're like, no, it's not. I'm like, come on. That's all. So Keyboard 2.0. So this is a web-based piece. And with their mobile phones, participants scan a QR code on a sheet of paper in a circa 1952 Olivetti typewriter, only to find that their phone's QWERTY keyboard now contains a message within the keys. The keys do function as well, but in an atypical fashion. Keyboard 2.0 seemingly intervenes a kind of a precious space, our personal space, our phone. It employs the trope of a classic analog typewriter to intentionally place us in a disorienting kind of comprehension gap where boundaries blur between the real, the virtual, past and present, and the confidential and disclosed. And it will work on any phone. It knows, it can pull and it can tell what phone you have, whether it's Apple, Android, and it knows exactly the resolution of your phone. I say that now, but it took 12 years to get to that point. So this all brings me to another one of my web-based works, which is Chroma Chamber, which I thought I'd demo here today. But before I present it, this project was not done in isolation. And I would like to thank, first and foremost, Bill Pettigrew, my main co-conspirator, and he coded it and was technical wizardry was unbelievable for accomplishing this. Paul Dooner for additional technical design. My wife Juju for unwavering support and added visual production. April Thompson with her curatorial expertise, as well as support from Cineworks and the BC Arts Council and Josef Wask Foundation. So I'll start recalling a bit about the genesis of the original idea, then walk through the demo itself. From there, I'll talk briefly about some of the technical and sociological implications of the work. Also, because it's interactive, if you want to think of a word or short phrase, later we can start entering them in and see what happens, because it's all about interactivity. So Chroma Chamber, the original idea was very straightforward, but also had the potential to relate a number of elements of the human condition. In a nutshell, I wanted to take any concept, great, small, or in between, and reduce it down to a single visual representation. To do this, I would require a massive and readily accessible visual database, which was fairly obvious, the internet. And as far as that kind of singular visual representation, the output for some reason seemed to be a natural fit was color. Plus in art, color is very important, as I'm sure it is in science. With these two building blocks, I began experimenting with a lo-fi prototype where I simply conducted Google image searches of literally any topic, manually gathered those images, and then combined them into a single composite image. I then ran a process to average that image down to one color. In essence, I was trying to tap the collective intelligence of the internet to derive a representative color of any word or phrase. I did enough of these distillations, I thought the idea merited further exploration beyond just mucking about, and I started even calling them by a name, chromatic distillations. The title itself derives from chroma, or the measure of color intensity from the Munsell system. It's kind of that section there, actually. This funky analog pointer. It's the pie-shaped section there. Indicating intensity of color. So that's the chroma aspect of chromatic distillations. And then the distillations part is to extract the essential meaning or most important aspect thereof. So I began to ruminate about, this is all well and good, but I began to ruminate about potential presentation formats, because I didn't think people, watching an artist hunched over a laptop executing commands was going to be very interesting. And the first idea was a book, then addition to prints, even kind of creating paints out of the colors this thing generated, painting walls the colors of war, puppies, or zombie movies, or whatever you want. Some of these ideas have been realized and others are still possible, but I really wanted to create a sort of flagship user experience that would best capture the fun and suspense I felt while waiting for the color of my word or short phrase to appear. Ultimately, I decided the presentation with the most potential would be some sort of installation where participants could not only be immersed in various projected examples of these chromatic distillations, but also be given the option to input their own terms via some sort of user interface. The piece would then generate and project their color based on unseen results derived from a live background online image search. This all sounded great in theory, but again, asking people to sit down at a keyboard, start typing, seemed like the furthest thing from an engaging art gallery experience one could get. So I was like, how am I going to do this? This led me to consider VUI, voice user interface. The idea being, obviously, the participants enter the space, guided via text-based menus, and through a series of simple steps, speak the words that they want to see the colors of, which all sounded fairly straightforward in theory. I remember the first time I met with my lead coder Bill, to ask if any of this was remotely possible. After an uncomfortably long silence, his answer skewed slightly towards the positive, which of course I meant to be, it's 100% possible. So the project started with a hand-drawn flowchart, went from there. After many iterations, software bugs, hardware fails, incompatibilities, head scratching, and more than a few sleepless nights, months turned into years, and Chroma Chamber eventually went final, which is cause de celeb. All right. On that note, let's take a look. Okay. So this is what I call the passive mode, and it just cycles through various examples. It's totally a legit experience. There's no need to interact it. Interacting with it is completely optional. If you want to just sit there and watch these, that's fine. We started with just the one color and decided, let's do two colors because you get that nice kind of comparison. That was probably the limit of what we thought any kind of internet could handle, and it's always a question of the internet. Always, because you just never know where this piece will be shown. Like today, it's just a public Wi-Fi kind of thing. So you kind of doing the lowest common denominator. It's also dynamic and time sensitive. The results, they're of the moment. So there's kind of an ephemerality due to that topical and geographical context. For example, if I was to do a search, which I didn't, but in 2019, for Ukraine versus today, I sadly would probably see two very different colors. All right, well, let's try talking this thing. I'm just going to do a quick hack because I want to get through it. Just check something. This is going to be unsightly. Please look away. All right. As you can see, it's all right. Okay, let's begin. Quantum. Yes. No. Sure. Ah, yes, that's a bug. There's still some in there. Let's just refresh that. Oh, maybe not. Oh, this will be interesting. Okay. Yes. Chroma key. Yes. No thanks. There's normally a really cool soundtrack that goes with this, but I didn't hook it up today. I'll do one more. All right, well, that's an I didn't do a two-color mode, but we'll get into that. Okay, so that's essentially it. Getting a bit technical here, but I think this crowd can handle it. Chroma Chamber is built on primarily an open source code architecture, operating on any Windows or Mac OS online laptop. Google Chrome Portable Browser acts as a client, is driven by HTML code and CSS formatting. A local NPM Express server operates as a service within the OS. Node.js in a JavaScript environment to generate color content with purpose-built graphics processing code. Speech-to-text is achieved via Web Speech API, which is a nice public Mozilla thing. A custom-built wake phrase system initiates voice input that supports fuzzy logic for conversational variety of positive and negative responses from participants. Hex codes for each color outputted are generated for reference. The color itself is pure color, not any kind of graphic file with any resolution, essentially one large pixel. The font used is called Menlo, often found in TV and film subtitles as well as code, and used here in a slightly cheeky way to convey sort of a translation from computer language to written English. The credits are an Apple Keynote plugin of scrolling PDFs wrapped in HTML. Chroma Chamber supports 1080p 4K video projector display resolutions. In a gallery setting, a microphone is installed roughly 10 feet above the floor as a contactless interactive input. A non-speech interface is also available as a remote wireless keyboard, and then it has a separate software mode that supports further accessibility for that keyboard mode. Chroma Chamber retains no record of any interactions, and no cameras are present. So that leads to kind of sociological issues, like why do this? Well, although it's primarily an artistic visual exploration of associative color, it opens up a bit of a discussion around the ramifications of machine learning within the context of big data. I'd like to mention some key ideas around algorithms and AI in general without going too far down the rabbit hole. Obviously, it's a hot topic, buzzy right now. I should also disclose there are people with way more of a vested interest in algorithms and their impact on society than myself. There's a research project by Lee Rainey and Jana Anderson entitled Code Dependent, Pros and Cons of the Algorithm Age at Pew Research. I cannot recommend highly enough. So yeah, let's get on with the kind of sociological implications. It should not be forgotten that while immensely useful for making sense of immeasurable amounts of data, it should also be called out that there could be pitfalls if there's an over-reliance on algorithms and AI. Really only when these two, I think, tools do things better than humans, and there are many things that can do better, it is a positive. You know, maps, navigation, digital assistants like Alexa, Siri, autocorrect are all examples of a sort of value add for sure. I think the jury is still decidedly out on chatbots like ChatGPT and Google Bard. Although there's time later, I forgot to bring. I was going to share an unintentionally comedic ChatGPT thing where a guy asked it in the language of the King James Bible how to get a peanut butter sandwich out of a VCR. Did anyone see that? Yeah, Helena saw it. It's amazingly funny. That actually kind of almost skews it to the positive for me. But yeah, I think a lot of things are clearly best left to sentience. For example, I'll go through a few examples of things. When conservative groups complained about a liberal bias within Facebook's trending topics, Meta switched from human-curated recommendations to algorithms, and the fake news epidemic was born. We all know how that turned out. Google search itself, again, an incredible source for accessing information and arguably an overall positive, clearly. However, because Alphabet is a profit-driven corporation, the algorithms may be optimized toward perpetuating and capitalizing on a concept called the attention economy. And that ostensibly is the commodification of people's attention spans. And what this does, it sets up a thing called a desire feedback loop that, while providing a seemingly accurate representation of content one wants to see, it can also entrench biases depending on the overt or unintended leanings of the algorithms themselves. Another issue in Chroma Chamber is the idea of oversimplification. Simplification of data, while convenient, can create a reductivism, a sort of dumbing down, homogenization effect. These quick digital fixes can lead to inequalities. Kathy O'Neill writes in Weapons of Math Destruction how big data increases inequality and threatens democracy. She says, employers are turning to mathematically modeled ways of sifting through job applications. Even when wrong, their verdicts seem beyond dispute. As well, it should also be said that almost 40% of the global population does not have access to the internet still. So in order to upload a photo online, digital cameras, scanners, and the internet itself are all necessary. Therefore, we are only viewing through only a kind of a subset of humanity's collective lens. While the colors of Chroma Chamber clearly reflect the voice of the world's majority, they still rely on data mined from a place of certain privilege. Not everyone participates in the online space. But perhaps the area I stumbled upon that I find the most fascinating, I also find the least amount of research, is this kind of notion of a dynamic color expectation disconnect that potentially exists between our personal viewpoint and machine intelligence. Now, what I mean by this is our own history affects our perception of the visual. Simple color in and of itself should be completely agnostic in meaning, but of course, never really is. There's a basic human propensity, I think, to attach significance to color, and this significance gets either confirmed or even amplified, or conversely very much subverted once a label is associated with it. For example, exactly the same color can be labeled death or midnight sky, and the language completely changes our mental and emotional processing of that color. In essence, we are kind of all bringing our own collective color baggage into Chroma Chamber, where sometimes things align, and sometimes they're way out of a line. Sometimes they're somewhere in between. And then you're getting this exercise of having a machine algorithm parse crowdsourced data in order to determine color kind of adds this question of, is color psychology nature or nurture? Or perhaps maybe it's kind of maybe a new paradigm around determinative color association involving AI. I kind of like how it jolts one out of their learned worldview and or instinctive responses. While I was doing some focus tests with Chroma Chamber, I sometimes found people validating that a color is right or a color is wrong. And that's completely based on their own narrative. Totally natural, not an incorrect response. The only counter I would add is perhaps that if given this specific context of chromatic distillation, the color is neither right or wrong, it just is. So have you been thinking of words or phrases? Anybody want to try it out? Just put up your hand, James will pick someone, and then I'll enter it from here because the microphone's over here. All right.
Electron.
Okay, let's begin. Electron. Yes. No. A lot of kind of air around it. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Yes, Michael.
Piet Mondrian.
Piet Mondrian. Yes. No. Good one.
Doug.
Blue.
Yes. Blue. Yes. No thanks. I'm always testing the fuzzy logic.
Just checking.
Trust me, I do that all the time.
Closer to E-climb blue than E-climb white.
Yes. And yes.
What if you do like Coliseum Telescope Serial 76?
Oh, no, got it.
Yes. No. I can't believe I heard that. Kind of.
Is that what you were thinking?
That's it. Yeah.
I'll try one. Yes. Jackson Pollock paintings. Yes. Yes. Mark Rothko paintings. Correct. Since it's art and science going on up in here. Rothko did like his reds. Anyone else?
Go ahead in the back.
What if you try color?
Yes. Color. Yes. No. I've sat in my studio for like 8 hours doing this. And it's not testing, it's just down the rabbit hole. Yeah, so like rainbow, for example, if you enter that, it's a nice, it's a beautiful gray rainbow because it just takes them all and mashes them together. It's a mix, so you're not going to get any one dominant color of the spectrum. So like saying blue or lemon or something like that, or grass, you get this very direct response. When you kind of get into these more abstract, I think you saw some examples where it's like far, close, or whatever. It's and it changes. Like it's completely arbitrary what the internet thinks is relevant at the time. Like I did gain once, and it's nice green. It satisfied all the things of what it gained. It ended up. I looked at the images, which I never show, by the way. I never show the images, and it was Gain detergent, which is that they use a grain branding. But it worked. It's like that's still relevant because Gain is using that grain for a reason. It psychologically has this baggage I was talking about. I'm going to switch now back to the presentation. Thank you, everyone. Those are great. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Can I ask question now or should I wait?
Is it involving Chroma Chamber specifically?
Yeah.
Sure.
I don't know, maybe it's a scientist in me. If you try the same entry like right after the first, do you usually get the similar one?
You get exactly the same. The hex code, there might be a slight rounding error there. where it might be just one symbol off, but that doesn't really affect the color. So if I was to try Doug's blue twice in a row, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. But the hex code number might be 1 digit separate, which I think it's a rounding error. I don't think the images don't change in the Google search that frequently. It's more of like a week-to-week, month-to-month, year-to-year thing when you start seeing differences between colors. I'm always testing white and black, which are never, if you know anything about like hex codes, 000 and FFF are white and black. Maybe I have that backwards. But they're not that pure in there because there's, I call them pollution, when you get other images in there that may not be entirely white or black. So you get this 0F, 0F, you get these combos. And that one changes quite a bit. Okay, cool. We can come back to this too if there's demand. Ars Scientia. So I'd like to say a few words about what's going on so far during my time here at Ars Scientia. First of all, great making new friends. Things all began with James' laboratory tour. Seems like yesterday and a million years ago at the same time when we were invited to explore further areas of Brimacombe and Ampel buildings, absorbing as many details as possible. When Timothy Taylor and I first started talking about a potential collaboration with his writing and my visuals, the natural fit was to pitch the idea of a sort of art book based on our inspirations from the residency. Thankfully, the idea was accepted, and we were thrilled to be working with Shelley and the Belkin team, as well as being given full access to the goings-on at QMI and Department of Physics and Astronomy. With the science, it has all been incredibly illuminating. Having attended a series of information gathering sessions, we met with many physicists from many specializations, and it has really personally drawn me into the lab work, and I feel determined to make my approach as cooperative as possible with the scientists, even creating images together. During our various meetings and interviews, I was also astonished by the intricacies and profundity of the work going on in the various disciplines and their relationships to the theoretical underpinnings, all of which, of course, I completely understand. No. So what's this collab looking like so far? Well, I've had the privilege of working with QMI's Alana Hollis and her group in the Quantum Materials Design Lab, where we are mixing clear paint medium with high entropy oxides that have been cultivated in the lab to repurpose them as paint pigments. From there, a number of small paintings have been produced that will appear as images in the book. Science and paint have always had a close relationship as pigmentation has evolved from rubbing of clay onto walls to what it is today. Recent studies even link first paintings to early language, linguistics and modalities of communication. I think this is also a nice metaphor for the novel approach happening with the HEO paintings. I'm really excited about this collaboration, and to say the least, I couldn't be happy with the results, and there's a lab book page to go with it. So there'll be more of these in the book. Keeping the collaborative spirit going, James Day and I spent an afternoon sourcing wire for a piece that I'm working on called 56 Wires, which there it is. I've always thought of wiring as a part of the nervous system of the technological world, and it's no different here, particularly with so many specialized applications going on. So that's a recently completed piece that, outside of my studio, I haven't shown, but I'm going to try and definitely get into the book. So that's just a small sample of the imagery being created based on my experiences. I'm really excited to be working with Belkin on the publication aspect itself. The visuals in the book will present as a variety of media including photography, painting, sculpture, audio, and video stills. Ars Scientia Symposium in May. Looking forward to that, where current and past residents will be in attendance. We'll be having more detail about the processes and ideas behind some of the art, writing, and science going into the book. Alana Hallis and I will be giving a more in-depth talk about the paintings, the high-entropy paintings. I encourage everyone to keep an eye open for further announcements on what promises to be a highly stimulating event filled with notable cameos. So, at this time, I'd like to open the floor to some more questions. I'll try my best to answer. James is going to pick the hands that are up, and I know there'll be a flood of them.
Well, first, let's thank Jeff again for his time.
Thank you.
So we have lots of time for questions. Just have
This idea of the search changes over time and potentially changing the color is quite interesting. Have you? I don't know when you made this one, but have you been following certain words since you made it, like so far, or do you have any plan to do so? I don't know.
Yeah, good question. I want to do a thing with whites, because I mentioned that earlier, and just get a kind of a grid going of X number of, I'd say, months of the color. But I haven't actually accumulated enough of them to make it worthwhile. But it is definitely, I think, that temporality is something I want to explore further, as the piece itself can't really do that as an interactive experience, but that could be something for prints or what have you as artworks, for sure. Absolutely.
Alex? Kind of a silly question, but what did you use to stick the wires to the backdrop?
That has been a heavily digitally manipulated photograph. So I took photos of every single wire and brought them into basically Photoshop and laid them all out to get that effect. My original idea was to try and do that, but then I realized some of these things, the gauges of them, they're like crazy thin and crazy. They're hard to manage. It would have looked like macaroni art, so I abandoned that immediately. But yeah, that process of taking the photos and then cleaning them up and laying them all out, that took like a lot. In fact, it took a lot of cleanup because they're very, very thin, like some of them.
For the color chamber, do you find that words that relate to each other will also relate in color to each other? Like if you put specifically for more kind of abstract concepts, if you put a word in, will you get an orange, and then if you put a word similar to that word, you might get a light orange or something similar to that?
Yeah, it's an interesting debate because you see a color come up and you're like, is that my own confirmation bias that I'm going yes, or is it something? But if you start doing that, it kind of messes up that confirmation bias, and then it's making that confirmation for you. So I did something, I think, depression and I forget what the other term was, but it was very closely related, and they were both kind of blues. If that's what you mean, yeah, there is that. There are these patterns. Sometimes though, you'll get a movie out or something with a title with a word in it, and it just takes over the search, and that's the whole crowd-driven element of it. So something depression might come out, but they might have branded it pink. I don't know why. But yeah, that's just an extreme example. But and that could be what? But you don't know, because again, I don't want to show that. It leaves a little bit to the imagination. After all, it is. I'm trying to keep it a little bit in the art interpretive domain as well.
You said you're working on tracking certain colors, but have you thought about also tracking things like emotion or something else related to society that you could see how those influences, some movie comes out or something like that?
No, but that's a great idea. Yeah, that someone write that down. You mean a term that's to say is that?
Like hope or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Or
No.
justice or something.
Yeah.
How that changes over time and how we represent it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very, very good idea. I think I actually hope's a good one, because remember when Obama branded with his campaign there, and it would have changed potentially. Would have become probably a purple. which is an odd color for hope. But what is the color of hope? Like, that's the thing about this. It'll tell you the color of hope. I feel like trying that now, but anyway.
I think you should do it because I was thinking hope and fear would be an awesome pair.
All right, let's do it.
Try it.
Yeah, let's try.
Then can we try art and science?
Very apropos. Okay. Which one am I doing first?
Your choice.
Right. Thank you. Okay, let's begin. Hope. Yes. Please. Yes. Fear. True. Fear. I think I did joy and despair once, not hope and fear. Ooh. So much darker on the fear. Hope is very pleasant.
Looks a little unicorny.
Yeah. Full marks for the word unicorny. Yes. Yes. Art. Yes. Yes. Science. Yes. Did man and woman once, and they were virtually the same. Wow.
I've got a couple of questions, Joe. I'm going to start with an easier one. So, in the work the creative collection work you've done with Timothy and the Trying for the book, how have all your interactions within the building, first of all, have they changed how you do art? And if so, how?
Great question. Yes, I have approached it now. I think it's a tough one to answer because everything changes the way I do art all the time. As I think we all go through life, things change. But this experience being so intensely like I'm doing this now has had a profound impact on the way I think about the approach that I'm taking. And I think it's just manifesting in the work itself and how I creatively respond to the things I'm learning here and what those are producing in the pieces. And the collaborative element of it, I've always loved to do, but I've never been able to do it with a bunch of world-class physicists before. So that has also been incredibly positive. And I think it will be one of those things that for sure will be indelible on my career as far as producing and learning.
And then the harder question, especially since Alana is not here, how has this collaborative work changed how Alana approaches her work?
Well, I know what she said a few things when it was happening. I think the first time I pitched the idea of, hey, I was very nervous. I was like, I want to take all this hard work you're doing and just throw it into a bunch of acrylic polymer. But she loved the idea. She's like, oh, I remember she said that's so poetic. And I was like, oh my God, okay. So that was something right away that I was like, I didn't know what to expect. And that was a very positive response for me. And I thought, okay, we might be able to do something here, which we of course ended up doing. And as we worked, it became much more aligned with, I really wanted to let her pick the materials. I said, I don't want to have anything to do with what materials you pick. I want that to be your decision based on your research and based on what you're doing in here. And that was liberating for me as an artist, having to make all the decisions all the time about what I want people to see in my work. It made things so much better for me, like not only pragmatically but conceptually, because what do I know about high entropy materials, right? And her time making these over the months and years translated into her choices, which I think made the piece have much more depth conceptually.
Can go to the back first.
So I love wires. Why do you love wires?
Well, as an artist, I approach everything visually, and they're interesting visually. There's various shapes, gauges. There's text on them, which I like on some of them. So from a purely formalistic point of view, that interests me. From kind of a conceptual point of view, this idea that they're connecting everything, even though a lot of stuff is so-called wireless, there's still devices running those wires, that if they should ever fail, or if there was ever any, and we've seen them fail when power goes out. Like I live in the West End and things blow up all the time down there. They can't handle the power. And they're so kind of innocuous, you don't even think about them. But if without them, we'd be screwed. So that element of exposing them for what they are and kind of championing them as this thing was kind of interesting to me.
I'm curious about the paint you're mixing. Are they, the final painting, are they going to be showing a particular condition that the matter inside of the painting? I'm not exactly sure what they are. Do they have like more active to a certain kind of condition of humidity or light, that sort of feature?
So the question was, do the paintings react to the environment after they've been produced? I don't think so. I've sealed them in layers of essentially plastic, liquid plastic, which has kind of sealed them in there. As a further step, when I present them, I'm also going to put them in acrylic cases similar to tomes to present them visually again as something kind of special, but also to keep any kind of high entropiness. There's a bit of danger involved. Like, let's be honest, there's fume hoods and all this, and I learned all about this. We're working with Alana. So I don't think they're toxic. I don't think they're going to react to anything because of the nature of the paint medium itself, which is really hardcore plastic that dries very quickly.
I was wondering if like every color or every word has its own unique color, and also can you plug colors in and then get a word back?
Every word does have its own unique color, even though they may be subtly different. I've never come across.
So could you plug colors in and then like, is there, because imagine like plugging a painting in and then doing it like pixel by pixel, and then it just writes a long like essay analysis of what.
Yeah, the reverse. Yeah, no, it can't do that, but that would be worth exploring. I think as a
But it's
reverse,
like every
yeah.
color is unique to the word.
Oh yes,
Wow.
yeah, very much so. I mean, you get various shades of gray when things get complicated. I've literally plugged in via the keyboard interface. I've pasted a paragraph in there. But after a while, the more obtuse it becomes, the more it just turns into kind of gray.
But they're all subtly different.
Yeah, like that piece I showed of Timothy's, where I took a piece of photo or a paragraph from his first book and did every word a separate color.
Oh, yeah.
You can see, looking at them, even just one like this, you wouldn't notice, but as soon as you start placing them together in like hundreds of them in rows, you don't get a lot of repetition. If you do, it's subtle differences, but they're never the same.
How can you like identify like the different colors? How can like, is it just like the computer can just do that?
Sorry?
Like how can you identify like two different shades even if they're like so subtly different?
Oh, it just does it. Yeah, I mean, and then it's your eyes doing the rest, right? You can just see the difference optically.
When you created the physical examples for Chroma Chamber, like the ones that you hung on the wall,
Yeah.
how did you translate the hex code to a color? Like, to a physical color. And I'm thinking the problem between translating from RGB light to CMYK reflected.
Yeah, so yes, they're all hex, which is completely cross spectrum. That is the reason we choose hex, is because it is not affected by CMYK or RGB. That is the closest representation of the color. So when bringing it into Photoshop or some kind of software, you can't print in RGB, as you know. Yeah. So it's just CMYK. Yeah. Yeah, I wish it could be. This is more accurate. Like if I was to say, forest here versus forest printed, you're going to get a CMYK version. There's no way around it, unless it was like a video piece, which is what this is. But it's very close, as you know.
Yeah. One last question.
Sorry, so then once you decided you were going to, like, how did you produce the color for the canvases?
Oh, those are archival inkjet prints.
Okay.
Yeah. So they're TIFFs, and then sent to a really good printer who knows how to calibrate, and they crank them out, and then I mount them on a panel, which is actually the hardest part of the whole thing, to be honest. But anyway, I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
I was wondering if you have any plans for making this available online for people to test on their own.
Yes. So there is a plan in work. It's a local server at the moment. The bottleneck is other servers, and they cost money. But we're not running a lot of data here, so we're looking at some online servers. And the idea is you can have as many of these things running at once anywhere in the world that way, and people can, like you said, input online. So it actually works. We do have it. We haven't fully implemented it yet, because I think there is a desire for that, and this confirms it. So we're going to have to get on that. Thank you.
That actually brings up another. Sorry, ask me a question. The guy behind the camera.
It's all good.
How does the speech recognition, does it work with other languages?
I wouldn't know. I only, apparently it does, but there is the keyboard. In order to kind of catch all, the keyboard interface is for that. In case it doesn't work with any particular language, you switch to keyboard mode, which is a simple hitting of the enter key, and you see how there's a little keyboard icon. Whereas the other one had a mic, and then you're free to type. Because we weren't sure. We did not write the voice API. It's something we are using, but they are working. They're constantly updating it for all kinds of languages. But I don't think it's anywhere near, like, even the English language. It's a bit dodgy here and there.
Okay, well, if folks have other questions, you can catch Jeff quickly now. If you can't catch him now, I can help you get in touch with him later. Otherwise, let's thank him again for joining.
Thank you so much. Thank you.